Hi everyone, I'm Zen, your astrologer, and welcome to your horoscope for the week of May 24th, 2021. We have an incredibly intense sky with a lot of shifts, changes, but also karmic manifestations all in one bundle taking place next week, where two planets are going to go retrograde. The first one is Saturn, going retrograde on the 23rd of May. The other one is Mercury, going retrograde on the 29th of May. On top of this, we also have an extremely powerful total lunar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius, a meeting of Venus and Mercury in the sign of Gemini, both of them squaring Neptune in Pisces, so it is an extremely intense energy which first of all has to send us in a certain kind of confusion about our plans for the future, especially the technical part, the tactical part, the how we execute it, how we enable it, how we enact it. Is everything, every single element of our future plans in place? Do some need readjustment, or are we from certain perspectives not living in the truth, not living in down-to-earth reality? Is our faith and whatever we believe strong enough, or is it perhaps a little bit way too strong and idealistic, maybe fantasy-like? Also, are all our relationships, especially those which matter very much to us and our futures, are they harmonious? Are they based on authenticity and truth and reciprocalness? Are they mutually fair and advantageous, or do we need to change them? Do we need to release some of them? Do we need to heal other relationships in our lives? This energy has also a lot to do with our identities, who we are, who we feel and think, and basically experience ourselves to be in this life, in this existence, in society, in the physical world. And if that sense of identity and also everything that we project onto the world, onto others, for example, the job that we do, the role that we embody as parents, as co-workers, as friends, as relatives, is that identity authentic, valid, or is it basically just a mask? And at the same time, are our thought patterns, our way of thinking, or better said, the lower functions of the mind which interpret reality, which give us the ability to navigate in life, in society, in our relationships, in even physical reality and everything that is connected to it. So basically, is our way of thinking serving whatever we want to live and experience in the future? Is our way of thinking serving who it is that we feel, think, and project that we are, our identity? And at the same time, where do our thought patterns, our way of thinking, the practical mind which governs so many areas of our lives, especially when we're on autopilot, especially when we're not as aware of what we're thinking each and every second, is that based on a very healthy worldview, life philosophy? Or do we need to become aware that something which has to do with a principle, maybe a faith, maybe something that was passed down to us by our families, education, school, does any of that need fixing, healing, releasing, sometimes purging? So all of these will be questions and basically themes and topics of soul searching, that inner call to go within, or maybe karmically reflected, perhaps synchronistically, in all our communications, relationships, information, advices, opinions which others share with us. So these questions need not necessarily to be answered straight away, but these will definitely represent a topic, a subject of deep contemplation, analysis, both rationally and at the same time psychologically, spiritually, from every single perspective, that this Mercury retrograde season will definitely highlight and call on our minds, our intellect to find palpable and rational answers. Rational for us personally, it doesn't have to apply to any kind of outer logic. But as long as we understand ourselves, what we're doing here, how our plans and desires can be accomplished to take us where we need to be in the future, if we are able to at least have a sense of mental security that we are on the right path, or we have every single possibility to get us where we need to be, well, that is already enough. But let's start taking a look at how these celestial conversations are going to influence our lives in more detail. Well, first of all, Saturn is going retrograde on the 23rd of May. So that is already an extremely powerful energy shift that we start the week with. Now, what does Saturn retrograde involve? Well, like any planet, when it is direct, when it moves forward, that is usually a period when the emphasis is placed on its outer expression. And especially in the sign of Aquarius, which is its home sign, its ancient ruling sign, Saturn is extremely powerful and at the same time comfortable in this part of the sky. And ever since the beginning of the year, well, Saturn in Aquarius manifested in a very clear way. It was all about the community, it was all about the people, equality, fairness, liberty, freedom. Also, it was all the rules and restrictions which limited the freedom, the equality, which might have discriminated certain people, certain groups of people, of course in the name of the greater good, of the common good. But all of this is highly susceptible to interpretation, basically how we live it. But at the same time, it was also about the humanitarian side of Aquarius, where a lot of people, especially those who were relevant leaders or representatives of a community or, of certain group of people, really invested efforts into organizing charitable activities or asking the government centralized power. Saturn is also a symbol of that, to send humanitarian help or to try their very best not to allow the economy to totally collapse and crash. It was also the efforts of scientists. Yes, there was a lot of contradiction, there was a lot of dichotomy, so to speak, but still the research, regardless in which sense, in which direction, was ongoing, and a lot of effort and work and sacrifice and resources were put into also Saturn. But of course, we might not have seen the most favorable sides of this, or at least we were not able to emphasize on it, because there was this ongoing square between Uranus and Saturn, the modern and ancient ruling planet of Aquarius. So this represented a lot of conflict, contradiction, duality. Saturn in Aquarius is the traditional that offers stability, that works, that is guaranteed to basically keep the structures of society together. Uranus in the sign of Taurus especially, it is the revolutionization of value system. It is the next, it is the new. It wants it right now, it doesn't want to wait. It is also very rebellious energy, it is also very spontaneous energy, very chaotic. And it wants to work with the objective truth, which especially in the first part of the year, was more like a conspiracy than anything, because no one actually was able to tell in a very clear manner what was truly going on, the origins of the virus and all of that. So very many times, instead of trying to invest efforts into finding solutions to the problem, they invested effort and resources and work into investigation, into research, as in to show the truth, Uranus, from a scientific, from a very practical, medical perspective. And we also had a lot of shocking revelations, shocking theories, shocking results of research and investigation, which of course countered many times this extremely powerful Saturn in Aquarius, as in some rules were not just challenged but successfully changed, transformed, or even eliminated. Others were, let's say, upgraded. So basically this is how the symbolism of Uranus started to get way more ground than that of Saturn, yet Saturn is extremely powerful, so it didn't allow any rebellion, revolution, any massive upgrade, or even incredibly powerful scientific advancement to break down the very cores and foundations of society, as in the morality, the human spirit, the distinctiveness of local communities, countries, etc. So basically, these two energies try to balance themselves out. And many times this attempt was rather shocking, chaotic. Many times it brought forth a social and political earthquake. Uranus in Taurus is all about earthquakes, and we could see this energy play out not just physically but psychologically as well. You know, everyone seeking the truth, demanding answers, governments in certain places in the world having to step down because the power of the people, ultimately Uranus. So basically this was more like the external expression of the Saturn. Now when a planet goes retrograde, its symbolism turns inward, so we, the individual, have to embody it much more. Especially with Saturn, because individually Saturn is our own set of rules, perhaps our own morality, our own dignity, our own inner structures. And in its home sign of Aquarius, it is everything that makes us unique, everything that makes us individualistic. And yes, that's also our talents, our virtues, our highest way of thinking, our morality, our life philosophies, our principles, but at the same time also our flaws and weaknesses. And it is our flaws and weaknesses that require tolerance and acceptance from other people, from society, from the collective. Again, the symbolism of Aquarius. And if we are treated that way, we also project back that which we're given, and vice versa. So this is really important, because when Saturn was direct, the emphasis was placed on the community, on the interhuman connections. The individual mattered a lot, of course, but it was its connection and cooperation and, symbolically speaking, symbiosis with other individuals that was the core energy of everything. Now with Saturn retrograde, it is much more about the individual itself and how the interhuman connections can serve the individual now. So it is about our rules and regulations, that which we can tolerate, that which we can accept, and many times that which we fight against or oppose. So the very first expression when the Saturn turns inward is that, yes, it's about the collective, it's about interhuman connections, but this is where, even the glyph of Aquarius may be a fixed air sign, but it's still dual in nature. So it is about how can the smaller collectives coexist with each other. How can the individual coexist in harmony with the collective, the smaller collective, for example, like the neighborhood, like the, let's say, workplace it belongs to? That is all interhuman connections which form a miniature collective. But also the greater sense of the collective, as in the country or even international community, or basically the human species. So there might be a lot of growing tensions between smaller collectives, for example, different political parties, or Aquarius, science and scientists, and those who are working towards humanity's scientific advancement. This is where different ideologies might clash. This is also where the rules and regulations, well determined by centralized power, might be contested more severely, more intensely than when Saturn was basically direct. Because when Saturn is direct, all of us kind of want to enable the greater good, the good of everyone, so we might be tolerant to certain things which limit us in the name of, nobility, the greater good, for us to play our roles in making the world a better place. But with Saturn retrograde, we might be not that tolerant anymore. So this will mean that a lot of people, especially smaller groups, are heavily going to contest the rules and regulations and laws and restrictions, and even, for example, the advancement of certain scientific branches or technologies. They might say either slow down or stop, or it goes against our moral values. This is where people are heavily going to be standing against any sort of discrimination, any sort of double standards. So this is where equality and the cry for freedom and truth gains a totally different dimension, especially that the ongoing square between Saturn and Uranus is an ongoing energy. Ever till the end of 2021 we're going to be heavily under this influence, so out with the old, in with the new. But when that Saturn is retrograde, even the individual, as I say, the component of the whole, will really start to think, analyze and process what that new means for them personally and the potential long-term impact of that new. So this is where even those people who were really, really for innovation, for like just stepping into the future, quantum leaping ahead, will now have this urge to second think. Also, this is where even those people who might be in love with technology, the internet, virtual world, and everything that has to do with basically the modern way of doing things, maybe they'll find a strong inner opposition that maybe it's a little bit too much. Let's go back to simpler things. Maybe they might basically be awakened to that all this technology and digitalization and the internet is making their beings, their souls, and not just the mind, kind of lazy. And when this external element, this external ease stops one's thought processes to try to go higher, well, that will result in an inner conflict of sorts where even those people, as I said, who are in love with technology and the modern and the new will say, well, it's time for a break, or maybe all this new and modern in this excess is not very beneficial to my individual life, neither for my family and the community I'm in. But of course, Saturn retrograde, as always, is a much easier energy for those people who were born under a Saturn retrograde, and it might be a little bit more difficult for those who were born under a direct Saturn. But of course, this is the overall tone. This year's Saturn retrograde, as I said, starts on May the 23rd and it will last until the 11th of October. So we'll have much more of this energy. Just that the energetic imprint of Saturn standing still in an air sign, especially that which governs the internet and everything, the circulation of information and energies like Aquarius, well, this might already slow us down. And at the same time, well, not at the same time, because Mercury, the ruling planet of Gemini, being in Gemini, is going retrograde on the 29th of May, and this retrograde will last until the 22nd of June. So that is also an air sign that is also responsible with communication, exchange of information, the flow of ideas, thoughts, basically information. So that is already another blockage, which will not just perhaps slow us down, but it will disrupt either our plans, paperwork, like official communications with institutions. It might affect all of our technology, phone, computer, software, electronics. All of these might go haywire. There might be, for example, a outage of internet service, satellite signal, mobile phone signal. This is also a time when solar flares and like cosmic radiation can be disruptive. And of course, with every single Mercury retrograde period, especially in the sign of Gemini, its home sign, its ruling sign, during Mercury retrograde is not a very good period to invest on new electronics, new devices, new gadgets. It's also not a very favorable time to commit long-term, as in contractually, to make agreements, to make promises for the long term, because, Gemini is a dual sign, so much can change, and with Venus being in here, and Venus also conjunct Mercury retrograde, our feelings, the way we perceive certain things in our life, people, opportunities may change very, very quickly. But of course, if you have been waiting for something for some months now, as in it's pending, it was already talked about, thought about, planned and replanned, but the date still falls in this Mercury retrograde period, well, that's not really something negative or bad, because the energy was already planned, so it is not something new. Actually, it quite favors that, because it's a completion. Retrogrades are always really good for unfinished business, completion of something which was ignored or left behind in the past. As always, Mercury retrograde is fantastic to replan, rethink. Almost everything starting with a re is a good idea. And usually it has a very favorable side, because let's say we have a very well-determined plan for the future, for something we want to do, or someone who we want to connect with, for example, a business, a partnership, an association. And during this Mercury retrograde, things stop and new elements enter into our awareness, let's say, new communication, new options, and we reintegrate them, we redo the plan so it's even better, it's even more favorable, more rational, logical, possible, realistic than before. Well, that is basically a blessing. And also those connections, opportunities, contracts, whatever they may be that we might lose under a Mercury retrograde, well, that loss is for our greater good, because something new and much better, even if it's unexpected or unthought of, can enter our lives and basically upgrade it. But of course, with matters of love and emotions and what we think about other people, what we think that other people think about us, and everything to do with, the other, because Gemini is always us, but also the other. This is where it might get really complicated Feelings might go up and down, they might change. We might have dual feelings even. We might love someone or something very much, but we might also have certain repulsions or rejections at the same time. And since Mercury and Venus are also squared by Neptune in the sign of Pisces, well, this also brings the past, especially the information, what happened, how we recall the memories, the events, may they be good or bad. It brings this information back to life, so we might have moments of nostalgia, rethinking, reliving, analyzing. But of course this serves clarity, but before clarity comes, we might be in a bubble of confusion. This might also be like taking a look at the past, especially regarding our choices, decisions, actions, reactions, what we shared emotionally with other people. Did we do the right things? Did we make mistakes? What is the big lesson and life experience and all of that? So we might be going through everything that happened to us in the past. Of course, in order to try and understand our present situations better and how those events kind of guided us to be who we are today right now. But it's not a very easy energy, especially for the mind, when the mind has to make sense of the feelings as well. And feelings are very, very pumped up because Neptune holds a supremely harmonious conversation with Mars in fellow water sign Cancer. And basically this is empathy, this is understanding, forgiveness, the desire to be emotionally balanced, the desire to be emotionally fulfilled, not to have things that weigh on your heart, not to have certain emotional blockages, for example, due to a bad relationship not being fixed or not being terminated or not being able to accept it with clarity, with forgiveness both for the self and that other person. And at the same time, this makes us very emotionally nurturing, empathic. This is the energy of unconditional love, where we want to be heroes, saviors, counselors, nurturers for other people, those who are disadvantaged, or basically the world seen as a collective. This is the healer, the light worker, the psychologist, the emotional nurturer's energy. And you know, this also has spiritual qualities because Neptune is connection to the source, so we might be empowered spiritually to help, to care for others, to be understanding, compassionate, empathic, to make that extra effort, go that extra mile to help someone, especially someone who is either a family member, part of our community, part of our circle of friends, someone who we love dearly, or the other significant half, child, parent, etc. So this is the energy of love, unconditional love, but we must make sure that this doesn't turn into undoing of the self, self-sacrifice, martyrdom, or just, you know, when someone is drowning and we want to rescue them, well, if we can't swim or we're not great swimmers, we don't jump in. First of all, we call the ambulance or emergency services and then try our very hardest to do what we can. But you know, jumping in might be a heroic gesture, so Neptune, the ideal, is there. But we must make sure that we don't become worse off than the person we're trying to save. And this might also be one of the big lessons of this Venus and Neptune square. For example, in which degree, in which measure is compassion and unconditionality healthy, and when it is not so healthy. For example, if we sacrifice a lot of time, energy, or whatever for another person, even if that person can very well help themselves, there's nothing wrong with them, we'll just make them lazy, and it's not something good that we're doing for them. It's actually bad. This is also an energy like we might be in love with someone or something, like a hobby, passion, or anything that has to do with love and value, but dwelling on it, focusing on it, you know, expressing way too much love and passion and feelings might be a little bit suffocating for a person or for the situation, or it might lead to burnout. So balance, healthy balance, and also realism, to know the difference between the two situations, is very much the theme here. So that is what this energy is trying to reveal to us, to show us what healthy balance is for us personally, distinctively, individually. And at the same time, what is healthy for us and balanced for us, that might not be the case for another person. So when we deal with another person, regardless of who that is, we must also take a look at what it means to them. This is the empathy, the gift of empathy. Because what works for us might not work for another person. And many times we're blind to this. We might think that, well, it worked for me, why can't it work for another? So very many times our own personal example and experience is not valid or realistic for another person. And that is the moment when we have to go beyond and see the distinctiveness and the psychological configuration of that person. And through that we will understand their own unique measure and what's good for them and what's not. This is also the symbolism of Gemini, the twins. Yes, the twins are so similar in every way, even, their impulses or instincts, but yet they're different, unique, and individual people. They're not one soul. So even twins have their differences, and it is the acknowledgement of their differences which makes the twin connection so very strong. And at the same time, Pluto also holds a quincunx with both Mercury and Venus, and also with their conjunction. So this means that, for example, a communication or a truth, a revelation, us discovering something or a secret being revealed about another person or that area of life where Gemini is for you personally, that might be an unexpected surprise, a game changer, sometimes in a delightful way, other times in a rather painful way, but the truth is the truth. It can also mean, because Pluto is retrograde, so we must take our powers, individuality, our freedom and independence back any way that we can. Because if we are not our own bosses, our own rulers, our own guides, let's say, then all of our relationship will be blocked and flawed and based on something which is not very authentic. Because if we don't embody our powers and who it is that we are, we cannot project something honest and authentic onto others, even if they're full of good intention. Also, at the very end of the week, Mars is going to be opposing Pluto. The opposition isn't exact yet, but it's already active and ongoing. And this can play out like an impulse, like a very strong urge to embody your power, even if that means separating from other people, even if that means stepping out of your emotional comfort zone. Like, for example, Mars in Cancer, detaching from your family, from a shared accommodation, from circle of friends, from those people who love you and protect you, and try your very best to do something on your own. It can play out quite the opposite way, where you were standing alone for a long time and you got tired. So in order for you to have emotional support, you might enter into an alliance with people who act like family, like protectors. Or it might require a sacrifice, a compromise. Maybe you have to step out from your emotional comfort zone in order to be very powerful in your career, in the job that you do, in whatever your purposes are in the world as a soul, as your karmic journey, as your destiny. your soul mission, so to speak. This is also where you might block everyone who has power over you to influence you in any way. So in order to protect your mental, emotional, psychological independence and well-being, you might say no to a job, to a career, to something that you were doing quite strongly until now, but that changed or that became way too much for you. And of course, last but not least, well, everything that I have said until this moment may not matter as much or may not be felt as intensely as the lunar eclipse, of course. Now, if you want to get the details of this lunar eclipse, I have a special recording dedicated to the astrology behind it, and I'm gonna link it in the description below. In this horoscope, I'm only going to be speaking about the big picture, as in a total lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, which is also a super full moon, so it is quite rare and extremely powerful and intense. An eclipse is a moment when the veil between the worlds is especially thin, so basically everything that is divine, everything that is higher, has access into our world, even our physical realities, in a way that usually it cannot be as influential. Of course, always a lunar eclipse is like a karmic discharge. It is like a reset. It is like a reboot, where one cycle, one theme closes and another one will begin eventually, but the emphasis is put on the completion and the closure, and whatever that means for us personally, may that be just drawing conclusions. May that be just finally deciphering, seeing and understanding the lesson. May it be something that has to manifest. May it be something that has to complete itself, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, for example. May that be us harvesting the fruit of our karmic labor. For example, releasing, purging, or fixing our karmic patterns. That is usually greatly emphasized at the time of a lunar eclipse. So basically, individually, it all depends on where 5 degrees of Sagittarius is for you personally. Which area of life does it fall into? But the energy is something that all of us might experience in a similar way, where, a faith, something that we believe, a life principle, philosophy, ideal, might either, complete itself. So that is also a purge. It is also an ending. A completion is like a moment when a chick hatches from the egg. Life within the egg ended, but that means that a new cycle is going to begin. And even when, let's say, a faith, a principle, something that you've always believed completes itself, it manifests, you can see that you were right to believe that. Well, that is an ending, because after whatever it is that you strongly believed completes itself, well, that integrates deep within you, so it's already a part of you. It is no longer something that you have to sustain actively. Like, let me just give you an example. When a theory is just a theory, well, even if it makes sense mathematically, we still have an element of doubt, because we could be wrong. Physical reality can prove us wrong. But when the theory is empirically demonstrated, proven that physical reality supports it, well, there is no more need to basically actively believe in it. We just know it. It turns into pure knowledge. And after it's pure knowledge, it fuels and supports and feeds us, and not the other way around. But of course, the same thing is perfectly valid if a misaligned belief, something that we always thought to be in a certain way, is proven to be wrong, fake, false, not supported by physical reality, or no longer supported by who it is that we turned into. Well, that is also a completion, a purge, a release. The spiritual, energetic, and mental excrement is released and abandoned, making way for something new, or giving us the chance to fill that void. Because a belief, especially a misaligned belief, well, it symbolically takes a lot of space in our minds, in our hearts, in our being. And if a misaligned one is released, shattered, broken, proven to be wrong, that leaves a free space. And that free space is gonna be replaced by whatever we see more fit. For example, new knowledge, new learning, a new path, new interest, new passions, whatever. And because this super full moon / eclipse, well, it's squared by Jupiter, both the sun and moon. Jupiter amplifies it, and Jupiter in Pisces is basically the spirit, the divine, the karmic pattern, which has to enable itself, and it is also based on truth, because Jupiter is the planet of inner truth, subjective truth. So again, the theme is that either we are going to be disillusions, old faith broken and shattered, and that will set us free, or something which was only a matter of belief until this moment in our lives will prove to be authentic and real. So either way, it turns in belief or faith, or theory turns into knowledge. We'll know either that it's not real, or we'll know that it is very real. And this is also the energy which kind of reveals hidden matters, maybe secrets, or maybe things that we were simply not able to observe or become aware of. So it's all information. Even if that information is highly subjective, it's gonna serve us very well, and it will take us and guide us to our own inner truth. Now, collectively speaking, it might be a whole other subject, because the events foreshadowing the eclipse, well, they were pretty violent, and they had a lot to do with exactly misaligned belief and the dark side of faith and spirituality, religion, religious dogma. And that is all within the symbolism of Sagittarius, of course, and the South Node, that which we collectively as a species need to release. And there might also be some secret seeing the light of day for the first time, secret or things hidden from our side regarding, for example, law and legislation, international law, long distance travel, technology, quantum physics, space travel, cosmology, other planets, because the highest expression of Sagittarius as in travel, well, in this day and age is already space travel, other planets, other worlds, other galaxies even. It can also represent a powerful quantum leap, where it kind of closes a way of knowing, or better said, a knowledge, the way we kind of use spiritual knowledge. Maybe this is where we might have to abandon certain traditional ritualistic approaches and embody and embrace a much more non-linear, or better said quantic, mysterious aspect of spiritual knowledge. Like, let me just give you an example where, some people might hold certain rituals, or they might do a magic or influence reality through a ritual, through a symbol, through a well-established formula, perhaps discovered by the ancient civilization or passed down through generations. And we might wake up to the reality that that no longer works, that is no longer valid because the world changed. The position of the solar system in the galaxy changed because it revolves around the galactic center. And we might be invited collectively as a species to discover what the new is, the new modus operandi, especially spiritually, new techniques, new ways of approach, new ways to integrate spiritual knowledge into very down-to-earth matters. For example, manifestation, or how it can improve our lives, how it can guide us to our greater authenticity and enlightenment, etc. And of course, Neptune is in Pisces, Jupiter is in Pisces. Those are two very powerful planets on their own, and they're also the ruling planets of Pisces. And so it's water, it's ocean, it's seas. Mars is in the sign of Cancer, so another strong and influential planet in the water sign. So this can also mean like flooding, the destructive force of water, excess of water. It can be a deluge, but at the same time, even the spiritual connotation of water, emotion and states and artistic energies, they can also basically wash over us. It can also be like love, unconditional love, the highest expression of love, becoming a very important theme in our everyday lives. But of course, there is that other energy, that other element of disillusioning, where even if we individually might be able to sense and know what that unconditional divine love is, this also is going to highlight the contrast between us and everyone else who doesn't feel it, think it, see it that way. So this might also make us feel extremely lonely because not everyone thinks and feels and basically philosophizes about love in such a pure and elevated way. Some people might just think that it's hormones. It's just chemistry. So, with each high, Jupiter in Pisces, there is a low. With everything, especially virtuous and beautiful, also Jupiter in Pisces, that we discover within ourselves, there is that contrast where we can also see everyone that doesn't hold that kind of beauty within themselves. Ultimately, yet another expression, it might be a moment when most of us are going to wake up to the fact that there's also a spiritual warfare going on. And by this, I'm not actually referring to, conspiracies and the cabal and stuff like that. But, all those spiritualists who get attention and popularity by calling the others' methodology or techniques of others deceitful, fake, outdated, etc. So there's gonna be a lot of contradictions between principles, between what is deceitful, what is deceptive, lie, half-truth, and of course the so-called truth. But the thing is, everything, especially within spirituality, is symbolic. It is meant to be subjective. It is meant to be a tool of perception. So those who kind of fight, those who are in conflict, well, they are all wrong. Because that's not what you do with spirituality. And ultimately, if only the divine is the truth, well, the divine can change its truth, its whatever, in a millisecond, and that would nullify all of our beliefs there and then. So the universe is a living, breathing, changing, evolving, interconnected entity, oneness. So there is no one single truth. Like even in an ant colony, in a bee colony, there are workers, warriors, nurses, whatever. So of course the divine intelligence will take on so very many different forms, shapes, avatars, and those are like different roles. No one can judge another because of the role that it was given to them or they chose to embody. You know, someone has to do it, but perhaps this is the true blessing of this lunar eclipse, that, you know, it is almost ridiculous to fight with opinions and speech and big words. A true spiritual warrior fights with manifestation and basically their frequency. So for a lot of those gurus who are hell-bent on fighting for their truth, and of course who claim that everything else is deception, lie, manipulation, well, this eclipse might very well expose them, because they might have been led by karmic forces to fight for something which might not be that real, exactly for at this moment for them to see for themselves that it will not manifest, it is not palpable, it is not in tune with reality, whatever they're fighting for, believing in. And this might give them a chance to have a change or an upgrade, or to search for the truth in a much healthier and realistic way. As I always say, healthy faith is full of doubts, so when someone doesn't have any doubts, that's already a massive alarm bell ringing. And it is exactly those people who don't have doubts, who are so strong in what they believe in, well, they might be the ones very surprised and shocked by this eclipse. Because, at least from a spiritual perspective, the sun in Gemini, so our minds, our senses that we basically interpret physical reality and everything in it with, opposes the moon, so it lights the moon in Jupiter's home sign of Sagittarius. So the eclipse is ruled by Jupiter basically. And Jupiter in its other home sign, the sign of spirituality, Pisces, basically the home of the spirit when it manifests as our unconscious. So our inner motor basically is going to hold a conversation of tension with both the sun and the moon. So it's definitely the truth being exposed and revealed. And you know, if someone's faith is extremely unhealthy or very twisted and misaligned, very, let's say, self-defeating, well, naturally the opposite of that will manifest, and that will be the shock, that will be the wake-up sign that it's actually the opposite of what you believe, which is much more in tune with who you are or whatever you're here to do. So it's gonna be full of surprises. And last but not least, it might also bring to daylight a very big cosmological, scientific, or perhaps even archaeological discovery that will have a massive impact as well. So thank you so much for listening. I wish everyone a blessed and miraculous week with this eclipse. I do hope that it truly changes your life for the better. And whatever you're gonna release, may that be energy, a person, a thought, a feeling, an emotion, well, it's gonna be gone forever, and something new and wonderful will take its place, especially as we get near to the solar eclipse in Gemini, but that is a topic for another horoscope. Thank you again. Until next time, bye for now.